Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Around 70,000 years ago, the first humans arrived in Australia. They had crossed variously by land and sea and were marooned on this continent by movements in the Earth's crust. Their evolved cultures did not understand the Western concept of land ownership. As they saw it, the land on which they were marooned owned them. The Australian continent became their world. Approximately 230 years ago, they were invaded by what I'm calling extra terra australis intelligence. The colonists generated many conflicts, sparked by all kinds of cultural misunderstandings and by naked greed. In my almost complete book manuscript, I will argue that there are similarities between elements of the original Australia's culture, some contemporary novel ways of teaching, and some aged care workforce research I conducted a few years ago. I have had to refer to all of the fields listed Sorry. In the last 230 years, the original Australians have variously supported many of the sympathetic Europeans who landed on their shores. And with great dignity, their descendants now represent themselves to large and small businesses, to national and state governments, and seem to have some chance of success in their quest, expressed in the Uluru Statement for a direct, constitutionally recognised voice to the Australian government. So what can we learn from them about their amazing resilience that might help humanity in the event that SETI is successful? In my almost complete book manuscript, I will argue that there are similarities between elements of the original Australia's culture, some contemporary novel ways of teaching, and some aged care workforce research I conducted a few years ago. I've had to refer to all of the fields listed here, and for each one I have a separate reference list which I'm happy to share with anyone interested. Shortly I will present two brief passages from interview transcripts between myself and key informants to my workforce research, and I hope you may comment on my interpretation of them as representing mini Goldilocks moments. My question to you will be, is it plausible to suggest that these quotes contain Goldilocks ingredients of new cultural norms? I think that among the sources of the resilience of the original Australians and their descendants, the idea of regulating population size according to the food-bearing capacity of available land is one of the important aspects. But I won't dwell on that because I expect we will hear more of that later in the conference. My focus will be on the way they curated knowledge that they had, the balance between the left and right brain hemispheres, and their structured intergenerational conversations. I will then describe three other kinds of structured intergenerational conversations, including that involved in my own research. Bill Gummidge has taught us that the original Australians shaped the land in which they lived, using fire, immense botanical knowledge, observations about seasonal changes, etc. None has told us, N-U-N-N, has told us about the stories that survive today among coastal communities around the entire perimeter of Australia, about the rise in sea levels 7,000 years ago, which resulted in the loss of approximately a third of the land mass of Australia. The original Australians understood that they were not the main player in their environment, and they thought it was important to preserve that memory. Kelly has shown us how not only the original Australians, but most other non-literate societies were able to remember vast bodies of knowledge through association with place. And she was delighted when she was able to refer in the epilogue to her first book that neurological evidence confirmed that the hippocampus is closely involved in that process. As regards the balance between left and right hemispheres in the brain, this is only advanced here as a hypothesis. It's based on the work of McGilchrist, who traces the swings in dominance between the left and right brain through the entire history of Western culture, and blames most of the ills that we suffer today on the dominance of the left hemisphere. To summarise his points in a necessarily brutal way, the left brain deals primarily in abstractions, things we can grasp, while the right hemisphere focuses on its environment and relatedness, the body, its feelings, and the wider world. He makes the point that this is as true of birds as it is of humans. Birds use mostly their right eye, that is their left brain, to focus on a piece of food on the ground, while their left eye, which is right brain, looks out for predators. In a brief passage of his work, he refers to writing as being a very left brain dominant practice. And of all the forms of writing, he claims that the left to right horizontal form is the most left hemisphere dominant. So the hypothesis is that the original Australians had a more healthy balance between the influence of the left and right brain hemispheres than pertains in the Western world. There are 4 types of structured intergenerational conversations that I want to consider. One from a Russian school teacher, one from a contemporary professor of creative writing, and one from the original Australians, and very briefly my own research. The first 2 of these are represented in this slide, and you cannot fail to see the similarity in the language. Both refer to intellect and emotion, and these can be interpreted as being primarily left and right brain dominant, respectively. Sukhomlinski and Cockerill recognise the link between the 2, and Brophy describes the nature of that link as being a contest. When he refers to teaching the unteachable, he is referring to his method of cultural adaptation without dictating to them. He's referring to his method of teaching, which guided his students through the process of cultural adaptation without dictating to them what that adaptation should be. I don't want to set the original Australians up as cultural exemplars, but when you imagine the stages they went through in their initiations, which are known to have been quite painful, the eating of male potoroos and male possums must have been 2 significant rewards for approaching manhood. I can only ask you to imagine the discussions that must have taken place between the elders and the neophytes before, during and after these ceremonies, and hope that my concluding slide may give a small hint of what some of these exchanges might have been like. My research involved one-on-one conversations between my baby boomer self and the young allied health professional tertiary students who became my key informants. None of the key informants wanted to work in the aged care industry, although all of them had had something to do with it, either as employees or as carers for a family member who depended on the service. You can read about the engaged research, social research methodology that I used in one of my publications. One of its key requirements is the personal involvement and hence vulnerability of the researcher. In the epilogue to my planned book, I plan to speak about that, and I'm happy to share the punchline of that little episode with you. But if you want to know the previously enigmatic intergenerational exchanges in my family that lie behind it, you will have to wait and read the book. The punchline is this. When I began to read Richard Dawkins' 300-page memoir, I got no further than page 9, where I read that his paternal grandfather had worked in the British Colonial Forestry Service in Burma, as it was then called. I immediately started searching the interwar records of that service because my paternal grandfather had worked for it too. What I found was that they were colleagues. Perhaps Dawkins' family conveyed an inheritance to Richard that was not unlike the one I received. Of much greater significance than to the workforce-related findings, I think are parts of the transcripts that are more relevant in big history and cultural evolution contexts. These were identified in subsequent analysis of the interview transcripts. While they embody the character development of John Stuart Mill's ethology, the reader of my book will become the modern human ethologist, dispassionately observing the relationships between me, the aged care industry, and the key informants to the research. To elaborate the question I posed at the beginning of this presentation, let us suppose that the Goldilocks moments in cultural evolution occur when similar adaptations are made by a large enough number of individuals. I'm suggesting that these two excerpts from the interview transcripts of my workforce-related research contain reference to different adaptations, each of which, if linked with other similar ones, could produce Goldilocks moments in cultural evolution. In both of these quotations, young allied health students advance views of their world in a somewhat tentative way. The first one seems to be referring to an adaptation that occurred in the past, and after some hesitation, the key informant enthusiastically expresses the significance of the adaptation. In the second one, there is a tentativeness about the first statement of the key informant. The interviewer, me, invites the key informant to stake more of a claim on that idea. By staking the claim, the key informant is affirming their own adaptation. So here I think we see a way in which an intergenerational conversation within an industry career-based structure can describe character development and influence cultural evolution. Now I'm open to questions and comments. No questions?
I think we're processing it.
Sorry?
I think we're just processing it. It's an interesting follow-up. All right, well, thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Very interesting.